So if we were to look at the word koinonia, it can actually be, depending upon the context, it can be translated in all these varying ways that I have here. Fellowship, that's probably the most common way that we know. If anybody has heard the word koinonia before, oh yeah, I know that word, that's fellowship. And that's certainly one way that it's translated. It's also translated as partnership. So for example, if there's a business partnership, sometimes that can be, the word could be koinonia. The word can also mean contribution. So if there was thankfully, whoever sponsored this lunch today, thank you. But if there was like a little basket over there and you were putting your $5 in or 10 or however many you put in for the meal, that would be called a koinonia. So you'd be making your contribution. Koinonia sometimes is sharing. So sharing either an experience or sharing a resource. Sometimes the word koinonia is used to talk about generosity, being generous with your resources, and then sometimes it can be translated as participation. Here's the point I want to make. So when we step back and we think about the gospel, the good news about who Jesus is, that's really important, but also what Jesus has accomplished, not just in his death, but also in his life of faithfulness and in faithful obedience, in his resurrection, and then also his ascension, his being at the right hand of the Father. When we think about that gospel, what's it ultimately about? And I would argue that it's ultimately about koinonia in the full sense of that word, koinonia. Koinonia is the end goal of the gospel. To be provocative here, forgiveness of sins is not the end goal. That's a means to an end. What's the end? Fellowship with God, okay? And not just fellowship with God and his people. And not just fellowship with God and his people, participating with God in what God is doing in this world. And not just that, but taking our gifts, the things that God has given us, and bringing those to the people and to the mission of God and joining in what God is doing in the world. That is the ultimate end and goal. So koinonia is the end, but it's also the means to the end. In other words, it's how we get to the goal. How do we accomplish what it is that God wants? We accomplish it by koinonia. And so I want to try to show you how this works with these 4 bullets here, as ways of just kind of unpacking both the word koinonia, but also how it gets worked out in the New Testament.